So looking at the issue of barrier to communications with where mental ill health is concerned. And we typically, when we talk about unconscious bias and prejudice and discrimination, even the picture there, we often associate the heading mental ill health with like the crazed, deranged person, and that they're violent and that they're a severe threat. So we need to look at ourselves as part of the de-escalation process to think about what prejudices do we hold in relation to mental ill health. Because if you hold a negative thought, then your thoughts are going to affect your behaviours, and then your behaviours will affect the person that you're dealing with. So there's also the difference in relation to the terminology like mentally vulnerable, mentally disordered, and mental capacity. Now, when we're talking about mentally vulnerable, vulnerable applies to any person who, because of a mental health condition or mental disorder, may have difficulty understanding or communicating effectively about the full implications for them of any procedures and processes. So this is a key one, especially for the police side or anyone involved in investigation and interviewing. If the person is mentally vulnerable, they may have difficulty understanding or communicating effectively about the full implications. So then we've got mentally disordered, which is a completely different term, which looks at, under the Mental Health Act, about mental disorder meaning a disorder or disability of mind. So you can have people who are classed as mentally vulnerable who do not get classed as mentally disordered. Now then, when we look at mental capacity, this comes under the Mental Capacity Act of 2005, and a person aged 16 or older lacks capacity in relation to a matter if, at the material time, they are unable to make a decision for themselves in relation to the matter because of an impairment or disturbance in the functioning of the mind or brain. It does not matter whether the impairment or disturbance is permanent or temporary. You must assume that a person has capacity unless it is established that they lack capacity, and to not treat a person as unable to make a decision unless they have taken all practical steps to help the person to do so without success. Now, possible indicators of mental ill health are listed on this slide here, and it covers things like the person is restless and agitated, the sleeping patterns are altered, they're crying more than usual or more than other people, their diet suddenly changes, they have difficulty remembering, they're irritable, they're impatient, they've got difficulty concentrating, they've got a sense of guilt, they're feeling numb, empty, despairing, a sense of helplessness, the pessimistic, impulsive, inappropriate responses to things, the paranoid, the confused, having hallucinations, the delusions, the withdrawn, placing themselves in danger. They've got irrational conversation, irrational behaviour, threatening behaviour without obvious reason, self-harm, threatening suicide, inappropriate removing of clothing, unresponsiveness to staff, they're confused, disorientated, inappropriate responses to questions, or they simply tell you that they're mentally unwell and they need help. Now, common factors which are involved in some of the cases that I work with, particularly where the person then has taken their own life, is there's this escalation of behaviours that the person is displaying whilst they're in the care of the state. And it's an obvious decline in their mental health. And they become a lot more restless and agitated. They're being very inappropriate in relation to their comments and conversations with staff or other patients, stroke detainees. There's issues around paranoia. There's confusedness and it's just irrational behaviour, and staff in the records are writing about them being inappropriate, irrational, but not then making the connection to this is evidence of a decline in mental ill health, and therefore it's evidence of an increase in risk of self-harm or suicide. So in relation to the de-escalation, we need to be aware of people's health status, physical and mental, because that then is one of the factors that you need to take into consideration as part of your de-escalation strategy.